A long time ago, in the village of Odogbo, there was a story that everyone knew. It was a story passed down from grandparents to parents, from parents to children, and from children to their children. The story was about a drum, a very old and mysterious drum, hidden deep inside Ajo Orun, the forbidden forest. No one was allowed to go near the forest, and no one was ever, under any circumstance, to touch the drum. The elders would always say, "The drum is not like other drums. It belongs to spirits, not men. If you strike it, you may receive great riches, but the price will be greater than you can ever imagine." No man who played the drum ever returned the same. The villagers listened. They obeyed. But not Ola Otan. Ola Otan was a young man known for his strength, bravery, and stubbornness. He was the best wrestler in the village, the fastest runner, and the strongest warrior. But more than all these, he was proud. He hated being told what to do. He especially hated being told what not to do. "Why should we fear a drum?" he would ask. "It is just a drum. How can a drum bring a curse?" "Olotan, do not speak foolishly," his mother warned one evening as they sat by the fire. "There are things we do not understand, things older than us. The drum is one of them." Olautan only laughed. "Mother, you believe in stories for children." His best friend, Ekun, who sat beside him, smirked. "Olautan, I think you are afraid." Olotan's smile disappeared. "Afraid? Of what?" "Of the drum," Ekun replied, his eyes playful but sharp. "You talk too much, but talk is cheap. If you are truly brave, why don't we go find it?" Olotan's heart beat faster. Everyone knew Ekun loved trouble. He was not as strong as Olotan, but he was just as reckless. And now, he was challenging him. "You want to go to Ajo Orun?" Olotan asked. Ekun grinned. "Why not?" Olotan looked at the fire, then at the dark trees in the distance. The forbidden forest stood tall and quiet, as if listening. Then he stood up. "We leave at midnight." The night was cold. The moon was high. The village was asleep. Olautan and Ekun moved like shadows, stepping carefully to avoid making noise. They had tied pieces of cloth around their feet, so their footsteps wouldn't wake the elders. "Are you sure about this?" Ekun whispered. Olautan smirked. "Are you afraid?" Ekun scoffed. "Never." Together, they entered Ajo Orun. The forest was different from the rest of the land. It was too quiet. There were no crickets, no rustling leaves, no night birds, only silence. A cold wind blew past them, and Olautan shivered. "It feels wrong," Ekun whispered. Olautan ignored him. "Let's go." They walked deeper and deeper into the forest, following a path no one had walked in years. The trees grew taller, darker, and twisted, like giant hands reaching for the sky. Then, suddenly, they saw it. The drum was massive, taller than both of them put together. It was made of dark wood that looked burned, but was smooth to the touch. Its top was covered with a thick animal hide, but the animal it came from did not exist in the world of men. Strange symbols were carved all around it, glowing faintly in the moonlight. Ekun's mouth fell open. "This is it!" Olautan stepped closer. His hands trembled as he reached out, touching the drum's surface. It was warm, alive. For the first time, fear crept into his heart. "Maybe we should leave," Ekun whispered. But it was too late. Olautan had made his choice. He raised his hands and struck the drum. Dome! The sound was deeper than thunder, louder than anything they had ever heard. It rolled through the forest, shaking the trees, waking something in the darkness. Olautan's chest vibrated, his bones trembled, but something inside him wanted more. Again, he struck the drum. Dome! Dome! The air became thick, the ground trembled, the trees whispered. And then, gold began to fall from the sky. Ekun gasped, grabbing handfuls of gold coins. Ola, we are rich! Look! Olautan stared in shock. The gold was real. He bent down, scooping it into his hands, feeling its heavy weight. He laughed. I told you, the stories were lies. There is no curse, only fortune. Ekun laughed too, dancing in excitement. We must take this back to the village. We will be the richest men in Odogbo. But then, a voice came from the trees, low, ancient, and cold. You have taken what is not yours. Ekun froze. Who said that? You have played the drum. The trees shook violently, their branches twisting like angry arms. The gold coins on the ground began to melt into black liquid, bubbling like hot oil. Olautan grabbed Ekun's arm. We have to run. They turned and sprinted, the forest behind them roaring with unseen voices. You have called us. You cannot escape. Olautan's heart pounded. The trees blurred past him. He could hear the wind screaming, the leaves whispering, the ground cracking. The drum had given them gold, but what had it taken in return? Olautan and Ekun have played the forbidden drum and taken its gold. But now, the spirits of the forest have awakened. What will happen next? Will they escape? Or have they sealed their fate forever? Olautan and Ekun ran as fast as their legs could carry them, their feet pounding against the forest floor. The gold they had gathered slipped from their fingers as they sprinted through the trees, but neither of them dared to stop. Behind them, the forest came alive. The trees groaned and twisted, their branches reaching out like giant fingers. The leaves rustled even though there was no wind. Deep, heavy footsteps echoed all around them, but when they turned to look, they saw no one. Ekun was panting, his breath coming in short gasps. Ola, what is chasing us? I don't know, Olautan shouted. His heart was thudding against his ribs like a second drum. Just keep running. But the forest had other plans. The roots of the trees suddenly rose from the ground, snaking across their path. Ekun tripped, falling hard onto his stomach. Ola! Help me! He cried. Olautan turned and grabbed Ekun's arm, trying to pull him up, but the ground beneath them was no longer solid. It felt like stepping on soft mud, sinking deeper with every second. A voice, deep, cold, and ancient, echoed through the trees. You have taken what is not yours. The boys froze. The voice did not sound like a man's voice. It did not even sound human. It was low and layered, as if many voices were speaking at once. Ekun's hands tightened around Olautan's wrist. Who? Who is that? Olautan swallowed hard. He didn't know. He didn't want to know. Then, the drum sounded again. Dome! They had not touched it. They had not played it. But the drum was playing itself. And with every beat, the air around them grew heavier. Dome! A gust of wind swept through the forest, howling like 1,000 voices, screaming in pain. Dome! Then, the whispers began. Hundreds of whispers. Some angry, some laughing, some crying. They came from the trees, the ground, the air. They were everywhere. Ekun covered his ears. Ola, make them stop. But Olautan couldn't. The drum was awake, and something else was awake with it. Olautan pulled Ekun to his feet, and together they stumbled forward, desperate to get out of the forest. But then, the shadows moved. Something big was standing ahead of them. At first, it looked like just another tree. But then, it moved. Slowly. Silently. Olautan's breath caught in his throat. The figure was tall, too tall for any man. Its body was covered in black bark, like a living tree. Its arms were long and twisted, like branches stripped of their leaves. Its face? It had no face. Just darkness. Ekun's grip tightened on Olautan's arm. His voice was barely a whisper. Ola, what is that? The creature took a slow, heavy step forward. The ground shook beneath its feet. Olautan's legs refused to move. He wanted to run. He wanted to scream, but he could do neither. The whispers grew louder. The figure raised one long, twisted arm and pointed at them. "You have played the drum." Its voice was not spoken aloud. It was inside their heads, crawling through their minds like creeping vines. "You have called us." Olautan forced himself to move. He grabbed Ekun's hand. "Run!" They turned and sprinted in the opposite direction, but the trees seemed to shift, blocking their path. The forest was changing, twisting into a maze. Branches lashed at their arms and legs. The roots beneath them moved like snakes, trying to trip them. The whispers became screams. Then, Ekun tripped again. Olautan stopped and turned. "Get up!" Ekun was struggling, his hands clawing at his legs. His feet were sinking into the ground. The earth was swallowing him. "Ola, help me!" Olautan lunged forward, grabbing Ekun's arms and pulling with all his strength. But something held him down. The voice whispered again, softer this time, almost gentle. "A price must be paid." Ekun screamed, his body sinking deeper. Olautan held on tighter, his muscles burning. "No! I won't let you take him!" The shadows around them shifted. More figures were standing between the trees now, watching, waiting. Olautan gritted his teeth, planting his feet firmly on the ground. He refused to let go. Then, the drum sounded one last time. "Dom!" And suddenly, everything stopped. The whispers vanished. The trees were still. The air was silent. Ekun gasped, his body shaking. Olautan pulled him up, and they staggered backward. The shadowy figures were gone. The forest was normal again. Ekun clutched his chest, his face pale. Did we escape?" Olautan didn't answer. He was still staring at the place where the tall creature had been standing. It was gone. But something told him it was not over. The two boys ran until they reached the edge of the forest. As soon as their feet touched the village soil, the air felt lighter. The night was just a night again. They collapsed on the ground, gasping for breath. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Then Ekun looked down at his hands. His fingers were trembling. His clothes were torn. His body was covered in scratches. But that was not what made his heart stop. It was the gold coin sitting in his palm. The same gold that had rained from the sky when Olautan struck the drum. Ekun's eyes widened. "Ola, I didn't take this. I swear, I didn't take it." Olautan's blood ran cold. The voice from the forest echoed in his mind. A price must be paid. The drum had given them gold. It had not taken what it wanted yet. Olautan clenched his fists. His heart was still pounding. This was not over. Not yet. Olautan and Ekun may have escaped the forest, but the curse of the drum is far from over. What will happen now that they have taken its gold? Will the spirits come for them? Olautan and Ekun sat on the ground, breathing hard, their bodies trembling from exhaustion and fear. The village of Odogbo was in front of them, its huts and cooking fires familiar and warm. Behind them, the dark forest loomed, silent and still, as if it had never come alive to chase them. But they knew the truth. They knew what they had seen. And worst of all, they had brought something back with them. Ekun stared at the gold coin in his palm, his hands shaking. "Ola, I swear I didn't pick this up. It was just there when we got out." Olautan swallowed hard. He looked down at his own hand, slowly opening his fingers. There it was. A single, round golden coin sat in his palm. It was heavy, heavier than any coin should be, as if something unseen was pressing against it. Strange symbols were carved into its surface, glowing faintly in the moonlight. He had not taken it. Yet, it had followed him. The village was quiet as the boys entered, moving slowly, their bodies aching. It was late. Everyone was asleep. Should we tell someone? Ekun whispered. Olautan shook his head. Number, not yet. They will be angry. They will say we have brought a curse upon the village. But what if we have? Olautan did not answer. He had no answers. His mind was filled with too many thoughts. The way the trees had moved, the whispers in the air, the shadowy figure in the darkness, and the words it had spoken. You have played the drum. You have called us. A price must be paid. What price? Olautan's chest tightened. He knew one thing. The forest was not done with them. Not yet. That night, Olautan could not sleep. He lay in his small hut, staring at the thatched roof above him, listening to the soft sounds of the night, the chirping of crickets, the distant hoot of an owl. But beneath those familiar sounds, something else was there, a low, deep humming. It was far away, but it was growing louder, a steady rhythm. Dom! Olautan's heart skipped a beat. Dom! It was faint, but he knew exactly what it was. The drum. His body went cold. Slowly, he sat up, his breath shaky. The drum was still in the forest. They had left it there. But somehow, it was playing. And it was calling him. Olautan's breath came fast and shallow. Ekun was shaking uncontrollably, his skin cold to the touch. Olautan grabbed his friend's shoulders. What did you see? Ekun swallowed hard, his eyes darting toward the small window of the hut. He lowered his voice as if he feared being overheard. I woke up because I heard it, he whispered. The drum. It was playing, Ola. It was playing by itself. Olautan's fingers tightened. Ekun continued, his voice shaking. I sat up and I felt something watching me. So I looked outside. He stopped. Olautan leaned closer. What did you see? Ekun's face crumpled. It was there, Ola. The thing from the forest. The tall one. The one with no face. Olautan's stomach twisted. It was standing just outside. Ekun choked. Watching me. The hut was silent except for their breathing. Olautan forced himself to stay calm. Did it do anything? Ekun slowly shook his head. Numberit just stood there. And then it whispered. Olautan swallowed hard. What did it say? Ekun's lips trembled. It said, the debt is not yet paid. The two boys sat in silence, fear pressing against their chests like a heavy stone. Olautan's hands curled into fists. This was not over. They had played the drum. They had taken the gold. And now, something wanted its payment. We need to tell the elders, Ekun finally said, his voice weak. We cannot handle this alone. Olautan hesitated. He did not want to admit they had been wrong. He did not want to face the anger of the village. But deep inside, he knew. They had angered something older than time itself. And unless they found a way to fix it, the spirits would not stop. Olautan took a deep breath and stood up. Come, he said. We must go now. Ekun rose slowly, still trembling. Do you think they will believe us? Olautan's jaw tightened. They will have no choice. Because outside the hut, the wind had stopped. The night was too quiet. And in the distance, carried by the silence, the drum began to play again. Olautan and Ekun have realized that the curse of the drum has followed them home. Now, the spirits have begun to whisper warnings. The drum continues to play, and the debt must be paid. Will the village elders believe them? Will they find a way to stop the curse before it is too late? Find out in part 2, The Price of Greed. Without thinking, Olautan rose to his feet. He wrapped a cloth around his shoulders and stepped out of his hut. The night air was cool, and the moon hung low in the sky. He walked toward Ekun's hut. He could not face this alone. "Ekun," he whispered, knocking on the wooden door. There was no answer. Olautan frowned. "Ekun, wake up." Still nothing. His heart began to beat faster. Something was wrong. Without waiting, he pushed the door open and stepped inside. Ekun was there, but he was not asleep. He was sitting on the floor, his knees pulled up to his chest, his arms wrapped around them. His eyes were wide, staring at the wall, unblinking. His body was trembling. "Ekun!" Olautan rushed to his side, shaking him. "What is wrong?" Ekun did not move. His lips parted slightly, and when he spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. "It is still with us," he said. Olautan's blood turned to ice. "What?" Ekun slowly turned his head. His face was pale, his eyes hollow. "I saw it," he whispered. "It was standing outside my window." Olautan felt a chill run down his spine. "What was standing outside?" Ekun's voice cracked. "The thing from the forest,"